Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. I did end up taking last week off from the show, and thank you again to everybody who said such kind things after the video that I put out last week. But you know what that means? We have a supersized show for this week, 2 weeks worth of numbers, and we're also going to be breaking down the summer box office. That's right, we've already hit the end of another summer movie season. We're going to talk about some of the biggest hits, some of the biggest flops, and some of the biggest movies that fall somewhere in between. So with so much to go to, let's jump right into the numbers, and let's go back to last weekend, which was August 23rd through the 25th, the weekend before Labor Day, where Deadpool and Wolverine spent a fifth week in the top 5 and a fourth week at number 1. It was broken up briefly with another $18.3 million, a 39% drop, followed by Alien Romulus at $16.3 million, a 61% drop in week 2, probably a little steeper than the Alien fans would have liked, but not too bad, especially considering that it is in the horror genre. It Ends With Us comes in third place at $11.6 million. Blink Twice debuted in the top 5 at number 4 with $7.3 million. I think it was probably hoping for a little bit more breakout potential than that. The Forge, which is aimed at the Christian audience, comes in 5th place at $6.6 million. Then we have Twisters in week 6 at $6.1 million. Coraline, the 15th anniversary re-release, holding well. It dropped just 48.7% in its second weekend with a total just over $5 million. Lionsgate has had a bad run recently because The Crow debuted at number 8. And really, this just adds to a string of bad things for Lionsgate recently. Of course, they had the horrid box office performance of Borderlands, which we'll break down in a few minutes. They've had the controversy around Megalopolis, including one of their marketing people getting caught using ChatGPT to generate quotes from real critics that they didn't fact check to make sure that they were real. And now The Crow, which they did not finance on their own, also not performing well to wrap up the summer. So yeah, kind of a summer to forget for Lionsgate. In 9th place was Despicable Me 4 in its 8th week of release with $4.2 million. And in 10th place was Inside Out 2, spending an 11th week in the top 10 at just over $2 million. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Alien Romulus. I was going to talk about this last week because I saw that there has been some discussion about whether or not it was a hit, whether or not it should have stayed as a streaming release. And I think that it absolutely should have been released in theaters because, first of all, when we look at it in context of the Alien franchise, it is now at number 2 all-time domestically at $90.6 million. This includes its Labor Day number, so it's a bit higher than the number that we just saw. Behind only Prometheus, it looks like it very well may be the second Alien film to cross $100 million domestic. We'll see if it can bank another $10 million. If you adjust that for inflation, though, it does drop to number 8, still behind Alien Resurrection and Alien Covenant, although its budget was significantly lower than both of those movies if you adjust that for inflation as well. And then looking worldwide, Alien Romulus is at $285.3 million, the second highest grossing Alien film worldwide, again behind Prometheus. And when we look at its budget breakdown, it had a reported budget of $80 million. I'm going to give it an advertising budget that matches, which puts its cost at $160 million. Now, these numbers are even a little bit out of date because they aren't the latest from China, so its net gross is actually a little bit higher than you're going to see here on its chart, but it's brought in $16 million from China, and that's going to be even more. It's going to finish at over $100 million over there. It's brought in $48.5 million from other countries around the world, and then $33 million domestically in week 1, $12 million domestic in week 2, and another $5.5 so far in domestic week 3 plus. So we've got a net right now, I estimate, at around $117.1 million against costs of $160 million. That puts its theatrical shortfall at about $42.8 million. And a lot of people would say, well, see, it's lost money. But as we talk about here on the show all the time, the break-even point is what you're looking for, I think, to be considered a success or a successful venture when we're talking about theatrical release, because there are other revenue streams, things like streaming rights and PVOD and digital sales, any kind of marketing tie-in that they may have had with the movie, although that's going to be a little bit lower because this is an Alien film. So even though it's not a runaway hit like some other movies that we're going to talk about later on in the show, I think it's going to approach the break-even point theatrically alone, which is pretty much what just about any movie wants to do at a bare minimum, and I think it will very easily be a profitable film. And if you want to talk about whether it should have gone theatrical or whether it should have gone straight to streaming, again, the studios have never been able to figure out the revenue split or just exactly how the money comes in from the streaming side. I think it was absolutely the right choice to put Alien Romulus in theaters. For people that want to say that it is a bomb, it is absolutely not. If you want to say it was a theatrical disappointment, again, I would not count it in that category. If you choose to do so, you may. But I think that it was a worthwhile investment in the theatrical marketplace. And I think that they are going to see, and not on a very long timeline, money coming back from this project, which is a proposition that you probably wouldn't get had it been put out on streaming. Dropping out of the top 10 for that week of August 23rd through the 25th, we had Trap after 3 weeks, Borderlands, no shocker there, after 2 weeks, and Stree 2 after 1 week. And when we look at the biggest theater count changes for that weekend, Borderlands lost 1,978 theaters in its third weekend of release. That left it in 1,147 theaters. Most of these theaters have a 2-week locked-in period where they have to play a movie like this. Well, once that period was over, they got rid of it as quickly as they could. Harold and the Purple Crayon, another disappointment from this summer, dropped 1,168 theaters and was out of wide release. Cuckoo dropped 1,152 theaters, also out of wide release. Trap dropped 832 theaters to get down to 1,604, and Skincare, which was a limited release film, dropped 690 theaters for a total of 70. And if you look at those 3 posters on the end there, Cuckoo, Trap, and Skincare, they look like they're all part of the same trilogy. There's something with eyes lately, big close-ups of eyes. And so, yeah, this is like the red, white, and blue trilogy of eye movies. Even though Borderlands lost a lot of theaters, it was actually not the most theaters that a movie's lost in one weekend this year, if you exclude limited engagements, movies that are intended to only play for a week or 2 weeks. Fly Me to the Moon actually had the biggest theater loss in one weekend, with 2,042 theaters lost in its third weekend of release. The Color Purple had a really good start on Christmas Day, but also lost over 2,000 theaters in its third week of release, 2,040 theaters. Drive Away Dolls lost 1,998 theaters in its third week of release. Are you seeing a trend here? Then we have Borderlands, which lost the 4th most theaters in one weekend this year at 1,978 in its third week of release. And then The Watchers, which waited until week 4 to have its big theater shed at 1,852. And when we look at what I like to call the road to recovery for week 34, you can see that we dipped below where we traditionally have been on average for 2015 to 2019, but we stayed above the average box office for the 2021 to 2023 window. The highest performing film in 2021 to 2023 was Free Guy a couple years ago, and the highest performing film for the 2015 to 2019 window was Straight Outta Compton, which was a big late summer hit back in 2015. Looking internationally for August 23rd through 25th, the number one movie was Alien Romulus, which brought in $41.6 million, followed by It Ends With Us at $22.3 million, Deadpool and Wolverine at $20.2 million, Despicable Me 4 at $18.5 million, and The Hedgehog from China at $10.2 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with the domestic numbers, you get the top 5 movies worldwide. And at number 1 was Alien Romulus, which didn't drop as much worldwide as it did elsewhere, largely, again, because it is a very popular film in China. It had $57.8 million worldwide in its second weekend, followed by $38.5 million for Deadpool and Wolverine, $34.1 million for It Ends With Us, $22.9 million, and an 11.2% increase in business for Despicable Me 4, and then Blink Twice, which debuted with just over $14 million worldwide. As far as the specialty charts for August 23rd through 25th, looking first at the per theater averages, at number 1 was Close Your Eyes, which brought in $6,199 in one theater. Close Your Eyes is a film from Spain about the enduring mystery around the disappearance of an actor, which spans decades. Deadpool and Wolverine came in second at $4,768 per theater, followed by Alien Romulus at $4,179 per theater. The Forge, which was in wide release, but in about half the number of theaters, less less than half of both Deadpool and Alien, brought in $3,659 per theater, and the 15th anniversary re-release of Coraline brought in $3,423 in each of its 1,472 theaters. As far as limited release films, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, Stree 2 was the top grossing film with $1.5 million in its second week. Then we have Between the Temples, starring Jason Schwartzman and Carol Kane, which debuted all the way back at the beginning of the year at the Sundance Film Festival. It brought in nearly $650,000 in 576 theaters. Dee continued its very successful run in limited release with another $473,000 in week number 5. Sing Sing continues to expand very slowly as it begins to make a big award season push. It brought in $240,000 in 191 theaters, and then Good One comes in 5th place in 31 theaters, bringing in just over $50,000. So that's the first box office weekend to talk about here on the show. Let's jump ahead now to the weekend that we just had, which was the Labor Day weekend here in the US. Let's look first at the 3-day weekend numbers. So this would be August 30th through September 1st. And Deadpool and Wolverine spends another week at number 1, week 5 out of 6, with a $15.1 million total and a 17% drop in business over the holiday weekend. Alien Romulus had a bit of a shorter fall, a 44.7% drop in weekend number 3, and a total of just over $9 million. Twisters actually had a 25.7% increase in business this past weekend and a $7.67 million total because it was put back in a lot of premium theaters, a lot of theaters that it surrendered to Deadpool and Wolverine. So a lot of people able to see it in maybe IMAX or 4DX that didn't get a chance to, and you can see that reflected in the box office gross. This 3 through 5 window is actually different depending on where you look. I'm sure it'll all shake out when final numbers come out because these 3 movies were very close. In 4th place was the Ronald Reagan biopic Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid, at $7.6 million, followed by It Ends With Us, which dropped 36.3% and a $7.4 million total. In 6th place was Blink Twice, which dropped 34.2% in its second week. That's not a bad hold at $4.8 million. The Forge comes in 7th place, dropping 30.7% and a $4.6 million total. That movie had an A+ cinema score, so no surprise to see it have a pretty soft drop in weekend number 2. Despicable Me 4 spends a 9th week in the top 10, bringing in just over $4 million. That puts its domestic total over $350 million. The new film Afraid from Blumhouse about the killer AI was not something that audiences were very excited to see over Labor Day. It brought in $3.6 million, and rounding out the top 10, at least according to the initial numbers, this is very close between Coraline and Inside Out 2, was Coraline, the 15th anniversary re-release, which brought in another $3.1 million with a domestic total of nearly $30 million for just the re-release itself. And if these numbers hold, that means that Inside Out 2 dropped out of the top 10 after 11 weeks, with The Crow dropping out after 1 week. It's kind of a tale of 2 movies right there. And if Inside Out 2 did indeed drop out of the top 10, that means it completes the longest run in the top 10 for any movie in 2024 at 11 weeks. That beats Kung Fu Panda 4's 10-week run in the top 10. Despicable Me 4 and Dune Part 2 are tied for 3rd place, although Despicable Me 4 has an active streak. If it spends 1 more week in the top 10, it'll tie Kung Fu Panda 4. And then there are 5 movies, including The Fall Guy and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that are all tied at 8 weeks as far as the longest run in the top 10. One position that Inside Out 2 has claimed, and this is a significant one, it is now the 9th highest grossing film of all time if we're talking about worldwide numbers, and it's very close to being in the top 10 domestically. And the reason this number 9 position is so important is that it goes above Disney's The Lion King from 2019, which means that Inside Out 2 can now be called the highest grossing animated film of all time, whether you count The Lion King as an animated film or not. So when we're talking about worldwide grosses, we can finally end this discourse or this discussion or whatever you want to call it, because I hear about it every time. I've talked about it here on the show. I get it. There are a lot of people who consider The Lion King an animated film, and I know if you're going strictly by the letter of the law, then yes, it would be counted as one. There is some gray area there because Disney doesn't consider it one, and a lot of the trades and the sources for box office news don't consider it one. So let's just not talk about it anymore because it doesn't matter, because Inside Out 2 is over worldwide. So Inside Out 2 is now the highest grossing animated film of all time worldwide. no asterisks. Looking at the biggest theater count changes for the weekend of August 30th, Inside Out 2 actually went into 1,100 more theaters than it was in previously. One last push. You got to get that gross up. The movie's not doing too great. Actually, I think it's because they want to get it into that top 10 domestically. So it went back into 2,660 theaters. Borderlands lost another 968 theaters. It is almost out of release entirely. It's only in 179 theaters. This thing was just an absolute bomb. Trap dropped 872 theaters. It's out of wide release. It's now in 732 theaters total. Alien Romulus dropped 795 theaters. My guess is that those are mostly premium theaters that picked up Twisters or Inside Out 2 or any of the other movies that came out this past weekend. It's still in 3,120 theaters. And then a movie I've heard about but haven't seen yet, My Penguin Friend, dropped 628 theaters. It remains in 244 theaters. That's a little limited release movie. I've heard it's pretty good. I might try to see it. Well, probably not in theaters, but I'll try to see it soon. Looking at the 4-day weekend, so this is the Friday through Monday stretch over Labor Day, Deadpool and Wolverine was at number 1 at 19.4 million. Its domestic total now over 600 million. Alien Romulus came in second place at 11.1 million. That puts its domestic total at 90.6 million, as we saw in that earlier graphic. Reagan jumps up to third place at just over $10 million. That drew a heavily older audience, no surprise. Twisters and It Ends With Us are very close. Right now, Twisters has the edge at $9.56 million and a $260.4 million domestic total, with It Ends With Us at a $9.5 million weekend and $135.7 million domestic total. Looking at numbers 6 through 10, The Forge jumps up to number 6 at $6.3 million for a $16 million domestic total thus far. Blink Twice drops down to number 7, although again, these two movies are very close together. We'll see what the final numbers bear out. It brought in $6.1 million. Despicable Me 4 comes in 8th place at $5.5 million. Its domestic total now over $355 million. Afraid stays in 9th at $4.4 million, and the 15th anniversary of Coraline comes in 10th place at just over $4 million for the 4-day weekend and a $30.2 million domestic total. And when we look at the race for the number 1 movie of the summer, it is getting very interesting, or should I say staying very interesting, between Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. As you can see, Deadpool and Wolverine opened with a big lead. Inside Out 2 has been closing the gap, and really over the past week, it had pretty much bridged that gap. They were running nearly neck and neck, but the holiday weekend means that Deadpool and Wolverine, if you look at that yellow at the end there, it inches up ever so slightly against Inside Out 2. So now it is running ahead just a little bit, but really I think it's going to come down to the wire between these two as far as what the number 1 movie of the summer is going to be. Perhaps Inside Out 2's longevity will win out. Perhaps Deadpool and Wolverine has the momentum. It's something that I'll keep tracking as we get into the fall-winter movie season. But to update where Deadpool and Wolverine stands as far as the MCU, it is now the 6th highest grossing film domestically in the MCU. It's the 6th film to cross that $600 million barrier, and it's only about $20 million behind the Avengers, so it's looking likely that it could soon be the 5th highest grossing film domestically in the MCU. When you adjust for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine is also at number 6, just ahead of Avengers Age of Ultron, but that's where it's going to stay. It does not have another $200 million in the tank to break that top 5. That $800 million barrier includes Avengers Infinity War, The Avengers, Black Panther, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Avengers Endgame. And when we look at the MCU by worldwide gross, Deadpool and Wolverine is at number 7 all-time at $1.262 billion. Black Panther's at number 6, and it's got about $80 million if it wants to bridge that gap to that number 6 spot. By the way, you may see some variance in these numbers. That's because there are several different sources to pull from as far as worldwide numbers, not so much domestically. So if there is a little bit of a difference in the numbers worldwide between some of these films, that's because I spent a long time pulling numbers from various different places. I try to get them to match up. They are pretty close, but just because there are a lot of eagle-eyed viewers out there, you should probably know there might be a slight difference in some of these figures. It Ends With Us set its own sort of box office milestone. It is now the highest grossing non-sequel or remake film from 2024 at $135.7 million, over Ryan Reynolds' If at $111.1 million. So congratulations to It Ends With Us. You are the king of the non-franchise film. Also, a fun little trivia that I believe one of our viewers pointed out to me, which is that if you are counting re-releases, which most box office sites do count re-releases towards the total gross of a film, even if it's years after it came out, Coraline's successful re-release for the 15th anniversary these last few weeks has now made it the highest grossing stop motion animation movie of all time domestically. It's now at $111.8 million when you include that re-release gross, which puts it above Chicken Run, which has had the record for over 2 decades. The Nightmare Before Christmas comes in third place at $87.6 million, and yes, that does include all of its recent re-releases. Then we have Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit at $56 million, and Tim Burton's Corpse Bride at number 5 at $53.3 million. So congratulations, Coraline. Its enduring appeal to audiences here domestically has now put it as the highest grossing stop motion animation film of all time. Looking again at the road to recovery, you can see that the box office figures for this Labor Day weekend were below where we have been traditionally, and also dipped a bit below where we have been in the 2021 to 2023 era. I think that's largely because we did not have a big movie that was releasing this Labor Day weekend, which kept box office grosses low. We'll see how it pops up this upcoming weekend with the release of Beetlejuice. The highest performing film for the 2021 to 2023 window was last year's The Equalizer 3, which debuted over Labor Day weekend. The highest performing film for the 2015 to 2019 window was Don't Breathe, directed by Fede Alvarez, who of course has another film in theaters now with Alien Romulus. Looking at these specialty charts for this past weekend, these are the per theater averages. At number 1 was a movie called Tokyo Cowboy at $9,764 per theater in 2 theaters. Then we had the documentary Seeking Mavis Beacon, which is about seeking out the real person behind the name Mavis Beacon, which is pretty much used as a brand name to teach typing to millions and millions of people. That brought in $9,062 per theater in just 2 theaters. At number 3, oh, this makes my heart happy, was the 20th anniversary re-release of Shaun of the Dead, one of my favorite movies of all time. It played in just 133 theaters, but brought in $4,210 per theater, although it is also slightly terrifying that it's been 20 years since the release of Shaun of the Dead. In 4th place was Deadpool and Wolverine, which brought in $4,172 per theater in each of its 3,630 theaters. And then we have Alien Romulus, which brought in $2,900 in each of its over 3,100 theaters. Looking at movies in limited release this past weekend, and again, these are numbers for just the 3-day weekend, not the 4-day holiday weekend. At number 1 was Sight and Sound Presents Daniel Live, a live theatrical presentation about the biblical story of Daniel in the Lion's Den. It brought in $1.8 million in 842 theaters. Then we have 1992, which played in 875 theaters. It's a movie set against the Rodney King riots in 1992, starring Tyrese Gibson and Ray Liotta in what I think might be his actual last movie role. He was a very busy guy, so we had a lot of movies that were made that came out after his unfortunate passing a couple years ago. $1.4 million for 1992 in 875 theaters. In 3rd place was the movie City of Dreams, which played 774 theaters and made $1.2 million. It is about a child who is trafficked across the border and put to work in a sweatshop, and I believe it contains a supporting performance from my former Schmoedown adversary, Sam Levine. In 4th place was the 20th anniversary re-release of Shaun of the Dead, which brought in $560,000. And then we have Slingshot, which was a sci-fi film starring Lawrence Fishburne and Casey Affleck. It played in 845 theaters and opened to just under $500,000. We've got so much more to break down, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this week's show. This video is brought to you by Mando. You've heard me talking about Mando on the channel for quite some time, which I only do if I found something that I like and that works for me. Mando is a whole body deodorant that's dermatologist tested for use anywhere on your body and clinically proven to control odor for 72 hours. We all sweat. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Mando makes sure that you smell great no matter how much you sweat with 4 cologne quality scents or an unscented version if you're going for that whole ninja vibe. I've been outside a lot recently and I put on Mando every single day because I can't control the sweat pouring out in the summer heat, but I can control how I smell. And with Mando, the answer is always great. And you don't have to worry about where you're putting Mando because it's safe for even the most precious areas. It's aluminum-free, baking soda-free, cruelty-free, dye-free, and vegan, but don't test that by trying to eat it. Trust me. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like a mini body wash or deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And if you want my recommendation, go with the bourbon leather scent. And I do have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code DAN at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. So with the Labor Day holiday, we have officially reached the end of the summer movie season. I know, it's hard to believe. It feels like it just began. And after a very bumpy start, starting with Bad Boys Ride or Die and going all the way pretty much to the end of the summer, there was a remarkable turnaround. People all of a sudden remembered that they wanted to go to the movies. It turned out that maybe it was just that there weren't a whole lot of movies that they wanted to see in that early part of the summer. And as always, we had big hits, big flops, and everything in between. So let's talk about some of those specifically, and I want to start first of all with the big hits. And the biggest hit of the summer, I know we were just talking about Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine competing for what would be the #1 domestic movie this summer, but easily the big hit of the summer was Inside Out 2. These are my estimated profits for the film, which include a $10.6 million return to investors from China, $387.5 million from other international markets. It made $1 billion if you don't include the domestic gross at all. Then $153.1 million coming back from the first weekend of release, $86.1 million coming back from weekend number 2, and another $119.5 million domestically from its week 3 plus grosses, because it has had a very good extended life at the box office. Looking at the budget at $200 million, I'm estimating marketing at $150 million because this was a huge movie. That puts its costs at $350 million. The gross is at $1.66 billion worldwide. I have an estimated net return of $757 million. Put that against the cost of $350 million, and I'm estimating that Inside Out 2 is bringing in over $400 million in profit based on ticket sales alone. That is a phenomenally successful film. I don't think anybody thought that it would be a success to this degree. This is one of those lightning strikes type things for Disney. And quite frankly, after the year they had last year, they needed a lightning strike kind of movie. And they had not just one of those movies, but 2 of them this summer, because the other one was Deadpool and Wolverine. There was a lot of thought about, well, it's an R-rated film. What are its prospects going to be domestically and worldwide? Well, it was a huge moneymaker. $13.1 million coming back from China, $239.9 million so far coming back around the world. But its strength was really domestically, $179.1 million from week 1, $77.8 million from week 2, and $81.8 million so far from its extended run at the box office. I have its costs basically at the same as Inside Out 2, $200 million production cost, that's standard for Marvel, $150 million for marketing. This was a heavily marketed film. Its worldwide gross right now is at $1.26 billion. I'm estimating a net from that of $591.8 million against $350 million in costs. That means that I'm estimating a theatrical profit of $241.8 million, which is fantastic. The one thing that I think is really going to inflate that are the brand deals that Deadpool and Wolverine had. They had a lot of marketing partners, a lot of big, high-dollar advertising partnerships that I think are going to boost and have already boosted its profitability significantly. And that's why, and I always am very clear about this chart is not the end-all, be-all as far as profitability, because there are things like ancillary sales and marketing tie-ins, product sponsorships, etc., that add to this. The part that I know and that I can estimate is the box office part. But it is possible that Deadpool and Wolverine could be as profitable or maybe more profitable for Disney than Inside Out 2 because of all of the different marketing tie-ins that it had with Heineken and everybody else. Another movie that did very well this summer was Despicable Me 4. I have it bringing in a net of $12.3 million from China, another $200 million internationally from other markets, $99.8 million from its first week domestically, $38 million from its second week domestically, and then another $59.9 million from its extended run. The budget on this was low. This is what Illumination does. They make a lot of money without putting a lot of money into the production. I'm still going to give Despicable Me 4, though, a $150 million marketing budget. Again, this is one of those movies that was heavily promoted. So that puts its costs at $250 million. Its gross right now is at $915.2 million worldwide. I'm estimating a net of $412.1 million against costs of $250 million. That brings in a theatrical profit of $162.1 million. And again, Despicable Me 4 had a lot of other tie-ins and partnerships, etc. So this is yet another success for Illumination that brings in a hefty profit for the studio. I know that I hate the Minions. Everybody knows that. And that critically, these movies are a little bit bumpy. Some getting a lot of acclaim, others really kind of mediocre to bad. But you can't argue with the fact that they consistently bring profits. The movies like Migration that we saw at the end of last year are the exception to the rule. The movies like Despicable Me 4 are much more what the studio is basically known for. There were also some sleeper hits this summer, and I'm not going to show you every movie that made a profit or lost money. These are just some interesting cases. Most movies were in that, between $50 million above or below break even, because that's how a lot of movies do these days. But It Ends With Us was a movie that is going to bring in a very nice profit for the studio on a pretty low investment. Its reported budget was $25 million. I'm giving it a marketing budget of $50 million. It may not have even been that high, but it was pretty aggressively marketed, which put its costs at $75 million. And you'll see that I'm estimating $60 million net coming back from its performance around the world, $44.2 million just from the first weekend of release, $19.3 million from domestic week 2, and $13.4 million from its extended run. That means It Ends With Us has a worldwide gross of $285.7 million. I'm estimating a net of $137 million against costs of $75 million. That means a theatrical profit of just over $62 million. And I think this is a movie that's going to do well on video on demand, etc. So good for the studio for putting It Ends With Us in theaters, because that $60+ million in theatrical profits is not something that I think you would have seen if you had dumped it straight to streaming. Another movie that's getting a nice return on a small investment is Longlegs, the most successful movie in Neon's history. It cost $5 million. Estimated marketing costs were around $10 million. So that puts the total investment at just $15 million. It's grossed over $100 million worldwide. I'm estimating the movie is netting about $52.7 million of that. And against costs of $25 million, that's a nice theatrical profit of $27.7 million, which for Neon is a great number because they're not a massive studio. And this is the kind of, if you want to call it small ball filmmaking, that I think we need to see more of. A studio that invests in an interesting project, doesn't break the bank putting resources into it, and is able to efficiently market it and bring in a nice return. $27 million coming back from a movie. I mean, that's not going to, buy you another studio, but that is going to keep the lights on. That is going to keep your studio funding and distributing other movies as Neon does. So really, Longlegs is a case of a movie doing things in kind of an old school way and bringing home a nice profit because of it. So those are some of the hits, and we'll get to some of the flops. But before we do that, we really have to get to the strange case of Twisters, which was a big hit domestically, but a big disappointment internationally. And when you look at those numbers, it did $2.8 million in China. That only brings back about $630,000. It did less than $100 million internationally. That only brings back about $39.3 million. But look at those domestic numbers. I'm estimating a return of $71.7 million domestic just from the first week of release, another $29.3 million domestically from its second week of release, and $43.7 million coming back from its week 3+ release. And if the studios were just to look at that number, the domestic numbers, they'd say, oh, well, this is going to break even, no problem. But its lack of business internationally is what is causing it to fall short theatrically. It had a budget of $155 million. I'm giving it another $100 million in marketing costs. That's total cost of $255 million against a net of $184.8 million. Again, this is all estimated. That has me putting Twister at an estimated theatrical shortfall of $70.1 million. If it had performed internationally, even close to what it did domestically, it would have easily made a profit in theatrical release. But the fact that it so fell off the cliff around the world means that it's going to need a little help to get to profitability. I think that it will, and the fact that it did do so well domestically is the reason that it will. But I've talked about it from the beginning, which is that Twisters, weirdly, is a movie that you can call both a hit and a flop at the same time, because its two box office stories, domestically and around the world, couldn't be more different. Let's talk about some of the movies that were disappointments over the summer, and let's start with Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, which did not do well and actually had its sequel pulled from the summer release schedule. I'm estimating $2.4 million coming back internationally, and only about $16 million coming back to investors, including Kevin Costner, from its domestic release. The budget was reported to be $50 million. The estimated marketing was reported to be $30 million, funded by Costner himself as well as his other investors. That puts the movie's costs at $80 million versus a net of $19 million. That puts Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 at a theatrical shortfall of $60.9 million. And people might say, well, given the scale of that movie, that's actually pretty good news because it could have been worse. The problem is there's another $50 million movie, Horizon and American Saga Chapter 2, that now does not have a theatrical release date, maybe going straight to streaming, and that is going to add a lot to that theatrical shortfall bottom line. So yes, it doesn't look terrible for Horizon based off of the fact that it really did not perform at all domestically or internationally at the box office, but there is a hidden cost in that movie, and that hidden cost is the second movie. So looks can be a little bit deceiving when we look at the profitability of Horizon, and we still don't really know what's going to happen with Horizon Chapter 2. Let's move on to a movie that we all knew was a box office bomb, and that is Borderlands. It had a budget of $115 million, but a marketing budget, that is not a typo, and I found multiple sources on this, of only $30 million. Apparently, Lionsgate and everyone else involved with the film knew that this was a lost cause and did not sink more money into that lost cause when it came to marketing the film. So that puts its total cost at $145 million. And I mean, this is just dismal. A $30.9 million worldwide gross, a net of $15 million against costs of $145 million. That puts Borderlands at a theatrical shortfall of $129.8 million. And I don't think that you're going to sell enough digital rentals to make that up. This was just a worst case scenario movie all around in a lot of different aspects. And in just about any other summer, this would be the biggest box office disappointment of the summer. And I think if we're looking at overall profitability, this will probably take the cake because I don't see a very robust rental market or second market for Borderlands. But when we're talking about box office sales, ticket sales only, there is actually another movie that I estimate had a bigger theatrical shortfall than Borderlands, and it hurts to say this because this is a movie that I was really looking forward to, and it's a movie that a lot of people really enjoyed from early in the summer, and that is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, and it's largely because it had such a huge budget, $168 million. I'm throwing another $75 million of marketing costs at it. That gives us total costs associated with the film at $243 million, and it just didn't perform well enough to justify those costs. $172.7 million worldwide. I'm estimating a net of just $81 million from that worldwide gross against costs of $243 million. That puts it at a theatrical shortfall, I estimate, of $161.9 million, which would give it the crown of the biggest theatrical disappointment of the summer. And like I said, it sucks to see a movie from a director like George Miller, who did have a vision and was ambitious in making this film, fail so badly at the box office. I think the only redeeming thing here is that it will have and has had a much more robust home market than a movie like Borderlands. But I don't see a way for Furiosa to eventually get to profitability, at least not in the next, 5 to 10 years. On a long enough timeline, I think most movies end up breaking even. But not Furiosa, at least no time soon, which, was a disappointment. I put the movie on my top 10 list for the summer. I had faith in the film. It just didn't pan out. When we look at the theatrical marketplace, I thought this was interesting. This is what the box office market share was going into the summer. I think I made this chart on April 30th. Warner Brothers and Universal basically had control of 50% of the total box office market share for 2024. Sony was at 12.7%, Paramount was at 8.4%. Disney pretty much had sat out the movie season to that point. It was only at 2.76% market share. Then we had Lionsgate at 5%, Amazon MGM at 6.5%, and all other movies at 14%. So what does that look like now? Well, 4 months and $3.6 billion worth of box office later, Disney is now the market share leader. It went from the studio with the least amount of market share to the studio with the most amount of market share at 27.88%. Warner Brothers had their market share cut by more than half over the summer. It's now at 13.81%. Universal and Sony stayed about the same. Universal's at 20.97%. Sony is at 13.48%. Paramount is still a non-factor at 7.37%. Lionsgate and Amazon are both hovering around 3%. All other studios are at 10%. But really, based off of just 2 mega hits, Disney is now the market share leader through the end of the summer movie season. And we'll see if that holds up through the holiday season. I know a lot of people talk about this chart and the fact that I don't put the biggest pie slices in order. That's because I wanted to keep the studios roughly in the same position or the same area because I want to be able to track them across the years. But yeah, a real turnaround summer for Disney, which was kind of the opposite of their story last year. And when we look at the top 10 domestic movies at the summer box office, Inside Out 2 is at number 1. Deadpool and Wolverine is making that charge to take over the number 1 spot. I will keep updating this as we get into the fall. Despicable Me came in 3rd place, followed by Twisters at number 4. Bad Boys Ride or Die at number 5. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes at number 6. A Quiet Place Day 1 at number 7. It Ends With Us, which I think will end up in that number 7 spot. Right now it's at number 8. If comes in 9th place, and The Fall Guy right now is at number 10 with $92.9 million. Although when we look at my predictions, I'm going to ask you to give me credit for Alien Romulus making the top 10 because it's only about $2 million behind The Fall Guy. And for the sake of more or less putting this list to bed, I'm going to go ahead and put Alien Romulus at number 10. And when you look at the actual list versus my prediction, it appears that I was able to correctly guess 8 out of the top 10 summer movies, which, you know what, honestly, I'll take because I wasn't really feeling good about my chances back in May. I missed on Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. The Garfield movie was just a little too low in another universe with maybe $10 or $15 million more in its gross. That could have been a top 10 movie, but I'm also happy with where I put the movies as far as my positioning 1 through 10. It looks like I was able to correctly predict that Alien Romulus would be the number 10 movie of the summer. I was very low on Bad Boys Ride or Die. Obviously, I missed on the Garfield movie. I think A Quiet Place Day 1 is going to end up at number 8. I picked it at number 7, so I'll take that. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, again at number 6 was a miss. When we look at my top 5, I picked Planet of the Apes at number 5. It ended up being number 6. And then I had the right movies in the top 4. I correctly predicted Twisters at number 4, which a lot of people didn't agree with. I put Inside Out 2 at number 3. It's the number 1 movie of the summer, obviously. Deadpool and Wolverine, I picked number 2. Right now it's at number 2. If it is number 1, it's not by much. And then I picked Despicable Me 4, number 1. It ends up being number 3. Honestly, I'll take it because this is a lot better than I do in a lot of summers as far as raw numbers of movies guessed and where I position it. So I'm going to walk out of summer 2024 with my head held high because I think I did okay in the prediction game. Looking at the 2024 annual domestic box office, really no change from the last time we looked at this chart. Inside Out 2 is at number 1, followed by Deadpool and Wolverine at 2, Despicable Me 4 at number 3, Dune Part 2 at number 4, Twisters at number 5, Godzilla Kong the New Empire at number 6, Kung Fu Panda 4 at number 7. Bad Boys Ride or Die, though, is just trying to overtake it. It's like $45,000 away from overtaking Kung Fu Panda 4. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is at number 9, and A Quiet Place Day 1 for now is at number 10, although I think It Ends With Us will soon be in that number 10 spot. Looking at the 2024 worldwide box office, again, no change really from the last time we looked at this chart. We have $2 billion grossing films in Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. Despicable Me 4 is trying to chug its way there. It's at $915.2 million, but I think another $85 million is a pretty tall order for that film. Dune Part 2 still hanging out there at number 4, followed by Godzilla Kong the New Empire and and Kung Fu Panda 4. Then we have 3 films from China, YOLO, Pegasus 2, and Successor, followed by Bad Boys Ride or Die coming in at number 10 at $400.5 million. This may be the last time we look at this particular chart for a little bit. This is the worldwide box office 365-day chart, which is now at this point pretty much the top 9 of 2024, and then Wonka, which is at number 5 at $632.3 million. And I think that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. So I will keep tabs on all of this, and if there's any interesting changes, I'll let you know. But as we get later in the year, this chart usually kind of goes away because it gets a lot less interesting. Don't worry though, because as we get into 2025, this one will be making a comeback as we can compare the releases in 2025 versus what we've seen thus far in 2024. So that does it for the box office portion of the program, but remember we've also reintegrated streaming charts, and I have 2 weeks of those. Don't worry, I'm not going to make this a 3-hour-long show. There were only a couple of interesting things that I wanted to note as far as the last couple weeks in streaming. So let's look now at the Netflix charts. This first one is for August 12th through the 18th, which saw the debut of the Netflix original movie The Union, starring Mark Wahlberg and Halle Berry, at 60.1 million hours watched and 33 million total views. That's a very strong debut for that movie. In second place was Emily in Paris Season 4 with 19.9 million total views. That's the first part of that 4th season. Then we have Kingsman: The Secret Service, which has been a real hit on Netflix lately at 15.2 million views, followed by American Murder, Lacey Peterson at 12.3 million views. True crime always does well on Netflix. Kingsman: The Golden Circle rounds out the top 5 at 9.64 million views, so a big resurgence in Kingsman love lately on Netflix, followed by Mission Cross at number 6, which is a Netflix original film from South Korea about a former secret agent pulled back into his old life along with his wife, a detective who didn't know about his past. Sounds kind of like True Lies, and also The Union. There's a lot of secret spy movies coming out right now. In 7th place is Lolo and the Kid, which is a movie from the Philippines about a con artist who bonds with the child that he runs scams with. In 8th place, for some reason, is the Emoji Movie. Why anyone would subject themselves to that, I don't know. Probably kids. 7.7 million views total. In 9th place is the final season of The Umbrella Academy at 7.5 million views. And then the Netflix original SpongeBob film Saving Bikini Bottom rounds out the top 10 at 6.2 million views. And when we look at the debut of The Union as far as 2024 movie debuts on Netflix, 33.09 million views is the 4th best movie debut of the year, behind Damsel, Under Paris, and Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, and just ahead of Lift. And spoiler alert, the movie did even better in its 2nd week of release with 40.6 million views. That puts it as the 4th best overall movie week on Netflix this year, behind Damsel's 2nd week, which brought in 50.8 million views, the 1st week of Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which brought in 41 million views, the 1st week of Under Paris, which brought in 40.9 million views. Then we have The Union in its 2nd week at 40.6 million, and Lift in its 2nd week at 36.88. And that's the way Netflix works. Sometimes it's the 1st week that gets the big numbers, but a lot of times it's the 2nd week, because a movie will come out near the weekend and then it'll have a full week of numbers for that 2nd week data to gather. And when we look at those most viewed programs on Netflix for August 19th through the 25th, The Union is number 1 at 40.6 million views and 73.8 million hours watched. Emily in Paris Season 4 stays at number 2 at 14.86 million views. American Murder, Lacey Peterson moves up to number 3 at 10.58 million views. Then we have Season 1 of a show called The Accident. This is a series from Mexico about a group of families who struggle to cope in the aftermath of a bounce house accident that shatters their lives. This is a drama. I want to make sure that I underscore that. In 5th place is the Netflix original movie Incoming, about a group of teens navigating the first week of high school with all the debauchery that you'd expect. The cast includes Mason Thames and Bobby Cannavale from It's Always Sunny, and the Mick writer-directors Dave and John Chernin. In 6th place is Untold, the murder of Aaron McNair, about the 2009 murder of former superstar quarterback Steve McNair. Migration hits the charts at number 7 at 8.32 million views. Then we have Kingsman: The Secret Service at number 8. In 9th place is I Can't Live Without You, a comedy from Argentina about a man who has to overcome his crippling smartphone addiction. And in 10th place is Tokunbo, a Nigerian film about a former criminal whose family is threatened unless he takes part and a kidnapping. And when we look at the 10 most watched shows on Netflix, so this is not movies, these are just series, Emily in Paris breaks in at number 10 at 34.8 million total views. That comes in just behind Money Heist Berlin Season 1 and American Nightmare Season 1. Bridgerton Season 3 remains the champ for 2024 at 98.47 million views. And when we look at the 10 most watched movies on Netflix of 2024, The Union breaks into that top 10 at 73.73 million views. That's ahead now of Atlas, Mother of the Bride, and Trigger Warning. Irish Wish drops off the list and also makes this list a lot easier for me to say every week. And you can see The Union is closing in on Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F., and A Family Affair to hit the top 5 most watched Netflix movies of the year. So when you merge those two lists and we look at the 10 most watched programs on Netflix, movies or series for 2024, The Union is now at number 10 at 73.73 million. That knocks Atlas off the list. Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. is at number 9. A Family Affair is at number 8. Baby Reindeer's at number 7 with 86.87 million views. Fool Me Once is at number 6. Society of the Snow is down 1 spot to number 5. And Lift is down 1 spot to number 4. And that's because Under Paris becomes the 3rd Netflix program to net 100 plus million views in 2024. It's now number 3 behind Bridgerton Season 3 at number 2 and Damsel still number 1 for the year at 138 million views. Let's take a look now at the Nielsen charts. Now, these numbers are delayed because that's just how Nielsen works, and they cover domestic streaming only. And let's look first at the top 10 streaming movies for July 22nd through the 28th. And at number 1 was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. We saw this globally on the Netflix charts a few weeks ago, but domestic numbers are particularly strong for the film. 23.4 million hours watched for the week of July 22nd through the 28th. Sony is the only major studio that licenses its films directly to Netflix, and it continues to show as far as performance goes. Trolls Band Together is in second place at 12.2 million hours watched, followed by Land of Bad in third place, Find Me Falling in fourth place. Hillbilly Elegy still seeing a surge in interest from the political season at 5.2 million hours watched. Descendants The Rise of Red is at number 6. My Spy The Eternal City on Amazon comes in 7th place. Moana on Disney Plus is in 8th. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 on Paramount Plus hits the charts at number 9 at 3.7 million hours watched. I think a lot of people were seeing Tom Cruise at the Olympics and decided to give that film a watch. And rounding out the top 10 is If on Paramount Plus with 3.5 million hours watched. And when we look at the streaming movie debuts here in the US as far as hours watched, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire actually had the second best streaming movie debut of the year, behind only Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which debuted to 34.1 million hours watched back in the first week of July. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire comes in second at 23.4 million hours watched, which puts it ahead of Roadhouse on March 18th through the 24th, the debut week of Damsel on March 3rd through the 10th at 20.1 million hours watched, and then Madam Web on Netflix, which debuted to 19.3 million hours watched back in May. And when we look at overall streaming movie weekends for the year, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F's first week is at number 1, followed by the second week of Damsel on Netflix at 25.7 million hours watched. But then we have the debut of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in third place at 23.4 million hours watched, followed by Roadhouse's first week and Damsel's first week, rounding out the top 5. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for July 22nd to the 28th, at number 1 is Bluey on Disney+, followed by Cobra Kai on Netflix and House of the Dragon on Max. Family Guy on Hulu is at number 4, followed by Grey's Anatomy at number 5. NCIS is at number 6. All American hits number 7. This is the latest season of the CW show, which has become an even bigger hit because it's been licensed to Netflix. 13.3 million hours watched in that number 7 spot. Dexter returns to the charts at number 8 at 13.3 million hours watched, followed by Criminal Minds, also returning to the chart at number 9, and The Boys rounding out the top 10 at 12.3 million hours watched. And when we look at this as far as watch time per available episode, at number 1 is the docuseries Dirty Pop about the really bad management behind some of the biggest boy bands of the 90s, just over 2 million hours watched per episode, followed by House of the Dragon as it approached the end of its second season at just over 1 million hours watched per episode. In third was the Apple TV Plus original series Presumed Innocent with just over 800,000 hours watched per episode, followed by Those About to Die at number 4, The Boys at number 5, Cobra Kai at number 6, Vikings Valhalla at number 7, The Bear still on this chart at number 8, Bridgerton at number 9, and Evil, which was approaching the end of its run overall, at number 10. Looking at the most watched streaming movies now, moving on to the next week, July 29th through August 4th. At number 1 was Jack Reacher Never Go Back, hitting Netflix at 11.6 million hours watched, followed by Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which made its Hulu debut with 9.3 million hours watched. Trolls Band Together is in third on Netflix, followed by Ghostbusters Frozen Empire at 7.9 million hours watched. Saving Bikini Bottom on Netflix, which we've seen on the global Netflix charts, hit 6.9 million hours watched in its debut, according to Nielsen, followed by the debut of Tarot on Netflix at 4.8 million hours watched. That movie came out earlier this year. Land of Bad Lands at number 7, followed by the debut of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. on Netflix at number 8, Moana at number 9, and Deadpool on both Disney Plus and Max, rounding out the top 10. As people got home from Deadpool and Wolverine, I guess they decided to revisit the first film. When we look at the most watched streaming movies of the year through August 4th, we have an addition to the list, which is Trolls Band Together at 41.4 million hours watched. It's been chipping away at that top 10 list for the last few weeks. That drops Hitman down to number 8, Lift down to number 9, A Family Affair down to number 10, and Wish out of the top 10 altogether for the year. The top 5 remain the same, headlined by Inside Out at number 5, Axel F at number 4, Damsel at number 3, Moana at number 2, and the Super Mario Bros. Movie at number 1. Looking at the most watched streaming shows of the week for July 29th through August 4th, at number 1 was House of the Dragon as it wrapped out its second season at 21.8 million hours watched, followed by Bluey at number 2, Grey's Anatomy at number 3, Family Guy at number 4, and the debut of Prison Break on this list, available on Hulu and Netflix at number 5 at 12.6 million hours watched. It's interesting, all 10 of these shows are actually all library shows. There are no original shows here, I think because the Olympics were going on, and so people were not watching as many originals, or they were watching the Olympics instead. At number 6 is Criminal Minds. Bob's Burgers returns to the list at number 7, followed by All American at number 8, NCIS at number 9, and Lost hitting the chart on Hulu and Netflix at number 10 with 11.3 million hours watched. Looking at the week as far as watch time per available episode, there are a few originals mixed in here. At number 1 was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which brought in 1.54 million hours watched per episode, followed by House of the Dragon at 1.2 million hours watched per episode. But then we see a big drop off because The Boys is in third at 344,000 hours watched per episode, followed by Unsolved Mysteries, The Bear, Cobra Kai, Mayor of Kingstown, The Umbrella Academy, Prison Break, and Evil. And when we look at the most watched library streaming series of the year through August 4th, Bluey remains number 1 with over 600 million hours watched, followed by Grey's Anatomy with over 500 million hours watched, and NCIS with over 400 million hours watched. The addition on this list is House of the Dragon, which hits number 10 and drops The Big Bang Theory off the list. House of the Dragon has hit 150.6 million hours watched, which comes in just behind Your Honor at number 9. And looking at the most watched original streaming series of the year, Love Island is now on the top 10 list. It bumps out Three Body Problem, and it's the only show from Peacock on this list. Reacher's at number 9. The Gentleman actually moves down to number 8. Evil moves up one spot to number 7 and now has over 100 million watch hours for the year. Avatar: The Last Airbender is at number 6. Fool Me Once drops down to number 5. The Boys moves up to number 4 at 142.8 million. And the top 3 remains the same with Love is Blind, Fallout, and Bridgerton, all as the top 3 original streaming series of the year. Bridgerton, the only original series that is one of the 10 most watched series overall of 2024. And that actually does do it for this week on Charts with Dan. There was a lot of data to get to. Don't worry, next week we'll be back to our regular schedule. First, though, let's look at what's coming up this week on various streaming services and in theaters. First of all, tomorrow we have the debut of Slow Horses Season 4 on Apple TV+. I've heard it's a good show. I have not seen it myself. Also this week on Thursday, Rebel Ridge, the latest film from Jeremy Saulnier, hits Netflix. I'm going to try to get a chance to watch that this week because I really like him as a director and it looks like an interesting movie. The big theatrical release this upcoming weekend is Beetlejuice on Friday. I'll be hitting the road to see that. Actually, as you're watching this today, I'll have my review out on the channel here tomorrow. Also hitting theaters this weekend is The Front Room from brothers Max and Sam Eggers, starring Brandy as a woman who is forced to start taking care of her husband's elderly mother. This looks like an interesting movie I'm going to try to check out this weekend. In limited release this week is an interesting looking documentary called Look Into My Eyes about psychics doing readings in New York. And also, this just kind of goes in the oddity list, but this movie actually exists. Hitting VOD on Friday is a movie called Off Ramp, which is about a couple of insane Clown Posse fans heading to the gathering of the Juggalos. I assure you, this movie exists and appears to be 100% serious, and sometimes I just like to flag an oddity here on the show. This week, Off Ramp is that oddity. Thanks so much for tuning in to this supersized edition of Charts with Dan, and thank you as always for watching me here on the channel. Stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Don't forget to check out more about our sponsor Mando in the comments section. And as always, thanks for spending part of your day here with me. I'll see you tomorrow with my review for Beetlejuice. Until then, take care, and I'll see you then. Bye.